Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is director, educator, and collaborator Cara Hinh, Associate Artistic Director at the Indiana Repertory Theatre. Join me now as I go on the aisle with Cara. Welcome, Cara. It's great to finally meet you. I've been trying to nail you down here for a while, but you've been doing some traveling, I believe. So where were you?
Yes, I was in Vietnam to visit some of my dad's family.
Oh, my goodness. I saw that in your background. You are Vietnamese, your heritage. So tell me about your family.
Yeah, I like to think of my parents as being two people that maybe should have never met, but they did at an apartment Christmas party here in Indianapolis. So my dad is a refugee. He came over in 1975. Actually, he left the day before Saigon fell. And it's 50 years this year, which is why our family decided to make the trip back together to visit Vietnam 50 years after the war sort of ended, at least on America's side.
That's fascinating, really. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did he meet your mother? Tell me about your mom.
So my mom is she is the child of two folks from Appalachia who moved up to Indianapolis to, get out of the hills of eastern Kentucky. And she was living in Lockerbie Gardens and went to the Christmas party and saw this cute guy, and she asked him out.
Wow. Well, that is quite a story. So you were born in Indianapolis.
Yes.
And when was that?
1993.
Okay. And so tell me about moving forward from that. How did you end up at the Indiana Repertory Theatre as an associate artistic director?
Oh my
Cover
goodness.
that background for me.
Let me just cover 31 years here for you. So I grew up here in Indy and loved theater. In fact, my freshman high school English teacher, Mrs. Watson, took me by the ear and put me in the theater classroom and said, "This girl is your problem." But I am lucky that I had teachers and people who nurtured that I wanted to be an artist, and I went to school for it and have bounced between Cincinnati, Baltimore, New York City, and I've gotten to direct or work as a director in over 11 different states at this point. And I'm back here in Indy because I believe that no matter where you're at in this country, in the world, that you deserve really beautiful, high-class art that challenges you intellectually, emotionally, and inspires empathy. And when I met Ben, I was actually so excited that he was leading the company and was like, "Hey, can I come join you?" It was very serious.
Where did you meet?
So we were introduced by the Associate Artistic Director of Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, which is, I was working there with her. And she was like, "You're from Indianapolis? You'd want to go to Indianapolis?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's where I'm from." And so the introduction began, and here I am.
So she knew that there was a position open, correct?
Yes.
And, wow, talk about timing. Perhaps fate, destiny, huh?
It really felt like so kismet and like things were falling into place because I was not like actively pursuing this job necessarily.
Did you know about it
No.
before the tech?
I didn't.
Interesting.
I was in New York City grinding, trying to make ends meet, doing like a lot of new work, development, working with playwrights, traveling, directing at universities and around the country. And I had like recently been craving a home base and an artistic space where I could really dig in and feel change directly, because something about New York City that I love, but is also like a double-edged sword, is that because there's so many artists, the art often is just being consumed by other artists. And at the root of my work is the desire for like community engagement and for the ability to like make a change. And I found that here.
Did you do your due diligence on IRT? Did you study its history and its background and such?
Oh,
all of that?
Absolutely.
While talking to Ben or after he hired you?
Well, IRT was where I actually saw my first professional show.
And what was it?
It was Christmas Carol.
Oh, be darn.
I was taken to Christmas Carol, and then
How old were you?
I think it was like third grade or
Was
something.
it school matinee?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Who directed at the time? Who was director?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Okay.
Probably Janet.
Okay.
I'm sure, or Risa.
Yeah.
Both like amazing women.
Where did you go to grade school?
I went to Southport.
Okay, that's okay. Southport.
Yeah.
All right.
Southport Elementary, middle, and high school.
Really?
Yes.
You're a Greenwood girl or Southport person.
I'm the South Side. I love the South Side. It's great down there.
The South Sider, yeah.
But it also means that I have, of course, like an inherent like North Sider ew.
Yeah. No, I get it. Did Southport have a high school drama program?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you do plays? Did you direct, act, or all the above?
That is where I did get to direct my first piece. I started as an actor, as so many people do, and I had a great teacher who continued to push and was like, go to school for theater, do it.
Were you a good actor?
I think I was a solid actor.
Okay.
I think that part of the reason why I transitioned out of acting is that there are a ton of stereotypes around who should be doing what in theater and film. And, you know, I'm not a small person. I've always been a larger body person. I'm biracial. I don't necessarily fit into like one category or another. And so I really felt the squeeze of not knowing where I fit, and that discomfort. And I had amazing teachers, but teachers who I think were also still trying to figure out how to work that too. And so I sort of fell out of acting because it wasn't there for me.
I understand.
Yeah.
So, in directing, what attracted you to directing?
Well, I had an amazing teacher and mentor, Dr. Paul Jackson, who has passed, and he is up there with Lorraine Hansberry drinking cocktails right now. But he was one of the only professors of color in our department and saw me sort of struggling inside of my identity and who I was, and took me under his wing in a really beautiful way. And then I was out in the Berkshires working in the costume shop, but I got to see a professional director work for the first time, and I was inspired. I saw him directing Noel Coward's Design for Living.
Oh, I love Noel Coward.
Me too.
Oh.
And it was this play that I think like was subtly queer, but this director was like leaning in really hard, and I got to see for the first time someone shaping a piece as a director, and seeing that a director could be a generative artist and an interpreter. And I was just really attracted to the idea of being a head coach, being like a cheerleader, and like trying to bring out the best in the people around
So
me.
let's back up. Where did you go to college then, your undergrad?
I went to Miami of Ohio.
Okay, why there?
Well, I actually, so during the recession of 2008, my father ended up working in Ohio because of, you know, getting laid off and trying to find a job.
What did he do for a living?
He was an estimator on large-scale concrete structures.
Okay.
Which is a very niche construction job. And he was laid off at his job here in Indy, and the, you know, quickest and closest job that he found was in Cincinnati. And I was like, oh, maybe I should look at schools in Ohio. And I went to Miami, and that campus is just beautiful.
Oxford?
Yeah, yeah. And Robert Frost said, you know, it was the prettiest place there ever was.
And I take it they had a good theater department.
They have a good theater department.
Did you apply for other schools, and that was the one you chose, or what was the...
Yeah, I chose Miami because I wanted to be close to my dad. I saw the potential for me to like try everything. I was like, I want to be an actor, but I also draw a little bit. I also am like interested in design elements. And I think that going to Miami and being able to try all of those different pieces of the theater world is what led me to become a director.
Multi-talented.
I costume designed 2 shows.
When you say costume designer, okay. Interesting. So what years were you there?
I was in 2012 to 2016.
And what was this experience like looking back?
I am really grateful for my time at Miami because it taught me a lot about resilience. You know, we were in such an interesting period of politically time. It's a more conservative campus, and the campus is like predominantly white. And being a biracial person, I felt it so keenly in a way that I hadn't before. Because in my own community, everyone knew who I was. They knew who my parents were. Like, I didn't have to explain myself. And I felt myself having to explain who I was over and over again at school, and feeling frustrated with not being able to fit into this sort of perfect,
You're the perfect person for me to compare notes with. I'm Mexican American, and yet I've had my whole life say, well, you don't look Mexican American, to which I finally learned my favorite retort was, what is a Mexican American supposed to look like?
Yeah.
What does a Mexican look like to you?
Yes.
And of course, I discovered that folks, generally their worldview is limited in this country, in general. But when it comes to race, you know, it's so loaded, right? And pigeonholing based on, was it your last name that gave you away?
Part of it, and also
because mine does, obviously.
I was a lifeguard the summer before school too, and I was just like, I came into school very dark, and my friends, I lived in the international dorm. A lot of my friends were Black when I started school, and people sort of like pushed me into like an other category. Even if they weren't sure what I was, they couldn't find their kind of whiteness in me, which is I think what you're talking about, in that people want to see.
You're not stereotypically, quote, Asian.
Yes.
Or as Midwesterners still say, Oriental.
Yes. Which I will say, sometimes my dad goes, you know, I'm Oriental like a rug. So
I love that. And I say, well, what did you expect? A guy leaning against a cactus wearing a serape and a sombrero.
Exactly.
Pulling a donkey.
Exactly. And it's just like the vastness of like, I think a thing I talk a lot about, even within like Asian American theater spaces, is the just like vastness of diaspora. And that like when we say like, right, like we say Asian American theater maker, but what do we mean?
Yes.
Do we mean East Asian? Do we mean Southeast Asian? Do we mean Indian? There's just...
Yeah, it's very complicated, yeah. People want to pigeonhole you, right?
And you have to represent all of that.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
All at once.
Yeah.
You become the, right?
Yeah.
You hold it all.
Yeah. So you had to navigate all that, but you found your tribe in theater, and it sounds also like your dorm or where you live. Yeah.
I think also growing up on the South Side, which when I was growing up was like a very predominantly white working class space. And now...
Well, you have the Appalachian roots.
Yes.
Wow.
My grandma's a Baptist, so...
There you boy. You got it all.
And then my dad would take us to temple, because there's a Vietnamese temple here in town. And it's run by all women, which I love so much.
I didn't know there was, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that there was a large population of...
Chin and Karen folks.
Yeah. There's a large community on that side of town as well. So there's a large Asian community, period, right.
And it's, I think, something that's really interesting about when I was probably younger, those folks hadn't quite arrived yet. So it's really amazing for me to see how my neighborhood has transformed in a way that, you know, was mostly white folks, now has this population of Southeast Asians. And I'm so happy about that. But I know it's caused friction.
We have so much in common, Cara, because I now live on the west side. I chose to move there because there's a huge Latino presence, and I didn't grow up in a neighborhood that was Latino. I grew up in Fort Wayne, and there were very few. We were one of the first arrivals, my family, off the migrant stream. So I'm loving being in this community, my peeps, you know, right? So it feels that way now when you go back there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just so...
Or you live there now?
Well, my family's in... I live in Fountain Square.
Okay. Well, that's the Appalachian part, although they've kicked a lot of people out, haven't they?
Yes.
Gentrified.
Oh, yeah. It was this tension that as I was moving back here and like knowing the area, I was like, where do I want to be that will give me somewhat a vibe of like a city and of Brooklyn, but also it's hard. Gentrification is hard.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, that's a bad word. And in some sense it is, right? Because where do those poor people go? They get pushed out.
But change is constant. And I'm not for gentrification. But it's a very complex thing. It's not like a cut and dry, black and white kind of thing.
Exactly. But it's a home for artists, and that says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of thinking about traditional, I'm using air quotes, traditional gentrification, it's like you come in the artist and the queer folks and then like the money. So it's, as an artist and as someone who, while living in big cities, has been that wave of artists trying to find housing that is not, so expensive. It's this balance.
Yes. It's a delicate balance. Back to your background. So after college, what came next?
I was a little lost, I think as many of us are, but I got a job working at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park.
Let me ask you though, would you consider yourself at that time, were you in demand? I would have thought that you would be demand, being a woman, being a person of color, all of those things. Or had the wave started after that? We have a lot to talk about, including the aftermath of Black Lives Matter. But the theater's always been in the vanguard of change anyway. So I'd like to think that they were ahead of things. Not that far ahead, but they were, right? Or I don't know.
A little.
Educate me.
No, I think that I consider myself sort of, I don't want to say lucky, but I really pushed my way into those spaces. For instance, my first professional assistant directing job was because Lisa Portez, who is this amazing Latina director, was directing a play at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, and my ex-girlfriend had seen her speak on a campus saying, we need more women of color directors. We need more women of color stage managers. And so I walked up to her on the first day of rehearsal, and I was like, hi, it's me. And so I was in this space of where that was a way in, but it was kind of, a lot of people were treating it still as the only way in. And something I think I've experienced throughout my career is being hired as an assistant or associate director to sort of fill that role of cultural consultant, as well as
tokenism.
Yeah.
Call it what it is. Yeah. Okay.
But in a way that I have a friend and mentor, Desdemona Chang, who is this kick butt Asian woman director, and she said to me once, diversity might have brought me in, but how I show up is why you're going to have me stay and why you're going to have me do
You had
more.
to work really harder than everybody else to prove yourself, huh?
And I feel like, I'm sure you've experienced this, I had a mentor once that I was getting heated. We were something wasn't going right, and a conversation that we had to have really candidly was, how you show up in this world, in this body, how you are perceived, being angry, you can't do it. And at the time I was so how dare Michael tell me that, but I understand it was out of protection.
Yeah.
And it was out of desire to...
It's a fine line, isn't it? You want to stand up for yourself, you want to be assertive, but then in this world, if you come from marginalized people, then you're either arrogant, you can't,
Listen.
I've been there.
I hear you. I see it. I feel it. It's...
Oh, yeah. And I love the fact that, we have a lot in common, but I think a lot of people in our situation, people of color who are artists as well, we've had to go the same path. We have to forge our own careers because we don't have that privileged support that you have. But as you said, once you get there, you are constantly under pressure to be the best. I want to be anyway. I'm a perfectionist. Are you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it's already in your nature, or you wouldn't have gotten where you are if you hadn't been assertive or proactive, or some call it pushy, right?
Exactly. It's so interesting because
you're damned if you're doing, you're damned if you don't, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And perfectionism is something I'm also trying to unwind in my mind too, because there is no perfect, right? Especially as an artist, you're always striving.
Well, I like that old cliche, life is a journey with no destination,
right.
Progress and not perfection. But still, you need to have a goal that's, the standard for art is why not strive for the best?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And which is, I think, so interesting because being exceptional is the baseline. I was talking to a friend about how I'm when I make art, it being good, that's just a fact. What we're adding on is how to make it great.
Well, I'll give you an insight as a reviewer what I've learned, and I'm a producer myself, an actor. I've done it but I also write about it. That's given me, I think, a unique perspective. And related to this, I explain to people, what do I look for? If there are distractions in that art, anything that takes me away from the story, that to me, there's a problem somewhere. If it's a wig, if it's poor lighting, if it's a sound issue, it's not always acting. It could be something that's why are they wearing those shoes? That's not in the period.
I know. It's such little things, and I feel
the devil's in the details, right?
Always.
As a director.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You see things that people would never even.
Or acting that's just not honest. You don't believe it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Aren't you glad you have that attitude?
Yeah. I sometimes say gosh darn it, I wish I could just watch a movie or see a play and not analyze the heck out of it.
Well, you can relax if it's really good.
Yes.
And that, for me, that's when I know that I've seen really good art. If after it's over, it's oh, is that all? I want more.
Yes. And I didn't think about that guy's shoes and why they were the wrong color. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you did it sounds like you did some great gigs. Wow. Great theaters and ventures.
Yeah. I think after Cincinnati, I was really wanting to move because I was in education there. And I love the youth. I love education. But I was really looking for moving more into the artistic side of the theater. So I went to Baltimore Center Stage, where I continued working in education, but I also got to be part of artistic.
You live in Baltimore?
Yes, Baltimore.
Where?
I lived right in Mount Vernon.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I loved Baltimore. It's so gritty, and John Waters.
Did you eat crabs? Did you go to crab feasts?
Oh yeah, I was introduced to what seafood was,
Yeah, it's a lot about beer drinking though too. Part of it, that's salt.
Beer and crabs and Old Bay. Yeah. I learned a lot about Old Bay.
What do you call that part of the crab? They said, "Oh, don't eat the devil."
Oh yeah.
What's it called? I think it's called something like devil. I don't know. It's poison something.
I showed up and I was there and I hit the thing with the hammer and I was thank you.
Yeah. How long were you in Baltimore?
I was in Baltimore, for about 2.5, almost 3 years.
Oh God! So, can you do that accent? I love that accent. It's kind of like
Baltimore accent.
It's kind of like a New York thing, like a Brooklyn thing.
It's like Brooklyn mixed with a little bit of Southern, because they like to remind us in Maryland that they are the South.
Maryland, is it Maryland? Maryland. Yeah, I had a sister-in-law from Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes, Baltimore, Maryland. It just kind of runs together.
So that is a very iconic regional theater, right? Mm-hmm.
And I chose that place as one that I wanted to go because at the time, Kwame Kwei-Armah, who was the artistic director there, was the only black man leading a regional theater.
Okay.
And I really wanted to learn from leaders of color. And so the artistic director, the associate artistic director, the director of new work, my boss, Michael, I love him. Michael Wiggins, an amazing teaching artist who taught me so much. I learned so much from being at a theater that centered voices of color and centered intersectionality.
And did he do a lot of work by people of color, playwrights?
Definitely.
Themes, yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I got to see more new work than I had in a long time. I think that the biggest thing was that hiring artists of color and having artists of color on pieces was a given and not just for one piece. And I think that was a big thing for me, was seeing that like the teams for every show were diverse, not just the shows by people of color.
Just reflecting the world we live in.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
programming and hiring and yeah.
And I think that that's a goal that reflecting the community that you're inside of is something that like I'm really excited to do at IRT. And something that I do believe the theater is like really committed to doing is reflecting our community back at us.
Well, I can tell you, again, as a reviewer, I've been around since they were founded, by the way. So I've been able to see this continuum of growth and change. And, before we came into the studio, Carrie Barman, who is your communications director, we chatted about, back in the day, IRT did a production of, you may or may not remember, Flying West by Pearl Cleage, African American. And so they were kind of in the foreground, and there was also the Phoenix Theater here, and Brian Fonseca, my late friend who was the artistic director. So, that goal towards reflecting our community goes way back here in Indianapolis. It took a while,
Absolutely.
But they really were trailblazers in that respect. And so to see where they are right now and to have someone like you at the table, I find very exciting.
Yeah. Janet did such beautiful work at continuing to bring, especially because I think back to when IRT was founded, it was founded by like 3 men. And to have a woman then lead for so long and, have a queer playwright in residence for over 20 years who was like, James, I love James. James is directing right now, to be like an openly queer man and be like, I am your Indiana resident playwright.
Brian was queer. Brian was part Mexican.
Yes. Listen, I'm just so excited for the future.
He did some of the first queer material. He did a lot of African American community. I was a member of an almost all Latino cast, The Promise by a Puerto Rican playwright. So Indy has the tradition of sneaking that stuff in, but I think in between the IRT and the Phoenix, they've educated a couple generations.
Oh, absolutely.
At least 3 now, hopefully, 50 years.
Yes. Yeah. And coming back and learning about Asante and the work that they're doing with our community. I'm so glad to be back and see how much the theater scene has grown.
Are you getting out and about?
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I said recently, 8 months and producing a season of theater has been so much.
Yeah. Well, are you consciously, intentionally hoping to see local theater?
Absolutely. And I've gone and seen a number of things at the Phoenix, and the New Harmony Project and their Playfest was something that I'm such a huge fan of. New Harmony and the work that they do.
So let's briefly go over some of the other great theaters. So after Balmer, you went where?
After Baltimore, I did a quick stint in New York where I did my really fancy thing, which was that I was a directing fellow on Hadestown on Broadway.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Rachel Chavkin is one of
I saw the
mentors.
touring production last year here. Do you know any of those people?
I probably know the director who put it in. Keenan.
Well,
He's a good friend. Yeah, but I got to go to New York and experience Broadway and see what it was like to produce on that scale and experience what New York theater felt like.
Wow. I mean, that's what people aspire to make it there in some fashion or form and to work in the professional theater on Broadway. So you did that.
Yeah, it was really... Watching Rachel work was so crucial in helping me understand how theater is about the people and it's about the teams, and how even on Broadway in this commercial space, you can be for the people. I think Hadestown is an example of a show that is really trying to,
it's interesting about that show. People either loved it or hated it.
Oh.
And, a lot of that, for whatever reason, it brought out everyone's insecurities, I think.
Because it's just like, I think that what Orpheus does, we all want to tell ourselves that we weren't going to turn around, but it is in our like nature.
Oh, yeah.
And that key question of...
For those listening, tell them, explain that. What that, it's a plot thing, right?
Yeah, so this musical is based on the Orpheus and Eurydice myth, which Eurydice is taken down into Hades, and Orpheus goes down to go get her. And he's allowed to leave with her as long as he does not turn back around to look at her the entire journey out. And he's at the exit, like you can see the light. He's about to step into the world, but his own doubts and insecurities and fears make him turn around. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, it's so human, our desire for security and to want to know, and that faith is so hard. Having faith is so hard.
I actually heard gasp in the audience from some. Oh no!
Yes. And that's the thing, is like the conceit of the musical is we're going to sing this song anyway. We are going to have hope even though we know how it's going to end. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a message that we need right now, especially. We have to keep going. We have to keep trying and hoping for a better world.
Mm-hmm. So how long were you in the city?
For that stint, I was there for a couple months.
Okay.
Before I became the directing apprentice at Actors Theatre of Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah.
Another great accent. Yeah. Louisville.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Actors Theatre. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened to their festival, by the way?
So it was the place that I first saw new work ever.
Yeah.
Humana, it was a tumble of like many, many things, but Humana was sort of done sponsoring the festival.
Oh no. Of course it was the Humana. Yeah, okay.
And it's just such a huge undertaking, and between COVID hitting, the theater shutting down, it was this like massive festival that was thousands of dollars to produce. And yeah.
So how was that experience?
It also taught me so much. I assisted on 6 shows in the course of the season, and I learned so much.
And how long were you there?
I was there from the when the season started to when COVID hit. So it was such an experience to be there, and then to be in Louisville specifically in 2020, in the summer of 2020, and to live in downtown Louisville in the summer of 2020. It was like an incredibly transformational summer, and taught me a lot about resilience, about what it meant to be someone who was asking for change, and to get tear gassed for the first time.
And what was that circumstance?
Yeah, so in Louisville, Breonna Taylor was murdered there, and the police department did not take kindly to protesters, even peaceful protesters, as we walked through the streets. And so it was just a really intense time, and I decided to show up and try and be out there. And it's where I experienced, for the first time, a different kind of racialized fear, I think, and it taught me a lot.
So then, how long were you there?
I was there through 2020, and I came back here briefly and was like barista-ing it up. And just...
What a cliche.
I know, right? I was like, I'm a barista back home. Before.
Well, I mean, you got to make a living. Yeah, that comes with the territory, doesn't it?
Absolutely, being an artist. And then I got this... The Drama League is this organization that supports directors in New York. And I had got this amazing fellowship and spent the entire summer of 2021 in Ithaca, New York, getting to direct and work with their company of young actors, and moved to New York right after that.
Wow. Okay. And then what? In
New York City, I did so much assistant and associate work for amazing people, and it taught me so much. I got to work on like a pre-Broadway musical that never made it to Broadway. New works that were being developed at like MCC, the Playwrights Realm. And I also really got to begin my relationship with playwrights and becoming someone who wanted to work with new work and shaping new work.
Well, so you got to see the whole continuum of making theater.
Yes, from the basement in downtown where we were like trying to find enough lights to light the stage all the way to a pre-Broadway.
Isn't that wonderful, though? Because of that background you have, you know what possibility means.
And restriction can sometimes be freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that more folks should try and put a bit of restriction on themselves.
But you can do work on a bare stage if you don't have anything.
Yeah, no, and it's about like, what does the core of the work need?
So did you ever also try your hand at playwriting?
That is a space that is reserved for only my notes app. I don't know. I've never been, I find the work that playwrights do, so much of it is independent and solo, and I'm such a collaborative artist.
Gotcha.
I've done devising.
Yeah.
So like taking pieces of writing, but always in conversation with others, which is why I think I like musicals so much, because they can't be written like alone. They require this like deep collaboration and just like test and test and test out loud of everything.
Well, you got that right. I so much want to talk to you offline because this is about you, but we share so much. I wrote a musical, an original musical on the life of sculptor Calder the musical. Now, doesn't that sound boring unless you know who Calder was? He had a very theatrical life, and his work was very theatrical. It is.
Listen, anything can be an exciting play, and I believe that.
Yeah. So you lived the quintessential New York life?
I did.
Did you live in a fifth floor walk up with cold water, or?
Thankfully, I did find, by the time I left, I found like a gem of a pre-war apartment that had an elevator.
Oh, wow.
And I shared
What
that.
side of town?
In Brooklyn, in Crown Heights.
Okay.
I loved living in Crown Heights because it was such a dissonant neighborhood, in that like we had a huge community of Hasidic folks.
Oh, right. Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And then there was this huge community of like Jamaican, Trinidadian, Islanders
God,
folks.
I love that.
And they sat right up against each other.
There's a documentary, I don't know if you've seen it, and also like a Netflix series about the Hasidics in that area.
Yeah.
Or nearby there.
It's so fascinating that like learning more about like there's different sects of Hasidism.
Okay. Who are the ones with the big mean hats?
That is in Williamsburg.
Okay. Yeah, Williamsburg. Yeah, okay. Wow. You've had a really rich background then.
I will say, as like a biracial person who like looks not white but is sort of in that ethnic gray zone, being in New York City was in some ways amazing because there are just so many mixed race people there.
You finally fit in, right?
I was not at all an oddity.
Yeah.
And people did not instantly try to cast like whiteness upon me or a different race upon me. There's so many people that hold multiple identities there that it's always like a question rather than...
So you haven't been the same ever since those days when you didn't fit in.
Yeah, it's such a... I think one of the really wild things about being home is how much more sure I feel about who I am.
Yeah, that was my thought. You feel more complete.
Yeah. And it took me in away for a little bit, but there's so much here. And there's so many kinds of people here in our city. Indiana is not a monolith of people. It is...
How much has it changed since you lived here? Since you left, let's put it that way, college.
Yeah. I think immensely. Thinking about where I grew up specifically, like the South Side looks completely different than it did in 2008. And I think that's a really exciting thing.
Different in what way?
Just the people, the restaurants, the grocery stores, having Asian grocery stores. I love it. It's so exciting. And I just want folks, I think my hope and what I hope art can do is allow folks to not be afraid of different things and of seeing new things come up in their communities.
So, thus far, what are your impressions of Indianapolis through the lens of Indiana Repertory Theatre?
Well, I am so pleased to see the diversity that has come through our doors and the commitment to diversity on our stages. I think that our community ambassador program is this really beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I was talking to Carrie before we started this conversation. I was telling you, it is so heartwarming to see the audience was almost 3/4 African American the night I was there. And to see those folks, Indianapolis is still segregated. That's the truth.
Absolutely.
Black, white audiences, rarely do they mix, but now with the IRT and the Phoenix, you're seeing mixed audiences. It took forever. And also Latino audiences at the Phoenix Theater, whenever, we're starting to see more of that too. And that's profound. And in my estimation, having lived here for as long as I have, and when I moved here, there were like 10 Hispanics, and we all knew each other. I hate that word, but that's what we called ourselves back then, Anyway, so the diversity is alive and well, and it can only grow, hopefully, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are committed.
And tell me about your LGTB sensibilities.
Yeah, I mean,
Queer.
Yeah.
Someone my age, I'm having a lot of trouble owning that because it's so tied to me to just, it's so pejorative and ugly and all of that,
Yeah, and that I think that's the amazing thing about time and change and shifts is that the reclamation of the word queer is something that it's astonishing. 13, 14-year-olds are like, yeah, I'm queer. Yeah. What about it? And not even sort of understanding what that stigma around that word used to be. And so it's, in terms of LGBTQ folks at IRT, it is, as that person,
sure.
As a woman who's a non-binary, femme, queer human who came out in college and lived, when I last lived here, was very much more in the closet. We're here, and we're not going anywhere, and we've always been
despite
on the stages.
This, we don't get into politics much on the show. We're open-minded, but nevertheless, some of the policies that are happening right now affect us all, so we can't ignore, especially those of us people of color. What are your fears?
I'm afraid that people will stop seeing art. I'm afraid that artists will be forced out of making it, because I think all art is inherently political, and
absolutely
on all spectrums, because whoever is making it, their identity becomes baked into what they're making and their perspective, and that is political. The way that you see the world is political.
Isn't it scary though that it is now seen as woke? And which is chilling. It's chilling. Anti-intellectual?
Yes. I'm scared to be completely honest with you, and I don't know that I've really said that out loud. All I can hope, and I know that our commitment is to, and why I'm very proud to be here.
Do you believe that artists, though, they've always been in the vanguard, but we have an opportunity to just do our work? That's what we can do in our really corner of the world of things we can't control.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? And that we need us more than ever.
Oh, absolutely. This is the time to have artists. This is the time to have the music that gets people going, that activates people, that makes people go to parties, that makes people interact with other people.
I always say when I go to the symphony or any concert or any art, I don't know the politics of the person sitting on either side of me. And yet, if we're all engaged, that gives me hope.
And we can have a shared experience. And art brings us together. And I have a mentor who sort of would say that art can sometimes feel like a tertiary form of activism. But in this moment that we're in right now, art is it's a thing of being on the front lines, of asking people to step outside of themselves and to see the people around them. So it's often days when I'm trying to sit and think about what do I need to do? Who do I need to call to help protect my disabled siblings, my trans siblings? I think about I'm making art that's going to hopefully impact someone.
You know what I find just really ironic, and you've probably seen this too, this matter of words. If you're in the theater, you know that words obviously matter. I mean,
yes.
But the recent removal of the T from LGTB on the signage for the Stonewall Inn in New York City, and yet it was, while they weren't technically transgender, they were transvestites, you know.
Yeah.
And yet, so that's part of the problem. Let's lump everybody together. And I mean, it's so ironic. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like absurd. It's humor. It's like...
I think beyond words too, and I say this as someone who has interacted with every kind of person in our like LGBTQ queer community, the getting rid of the T, the like isolation and the hatred towards trans people is just a tactic to try to further divide us in a way that is so unnecessary, because at the end of the day, we are all just human beings who want to live our lives.
Exactly.
And our trans siblings deserve just as much space and time and honor as humans.
You know, before we get too far away or too far off track, I'll have you back for part 2 and we'll talk about more stuff. But as far as your own work, what are you going to be doing?
Well,
what's coming up?
I'm for sure going to be doing Christmas Carol again here next year.
Oh, you're directing?
Yes.
How cool is that?
It's really, I cried a little bit because it was like so full circle. When I like saw the student matinee audience full of all these like young people, I did shed a tear backstage because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so full circle. But I'm doing Christmas Carol, and we are so deep in the midst of our season planning and trying to figure out what we're doing next year.
Are you doing a musical?
Yes, we are doing a musical.
Cool. But are you doing the musical, since you love musicals?
I'm not doing the musical this year. This year, but we'll see. But I'm very excited. We've actually chosen our musical, so I'm very excited.
Oh, you can't tell me?
I can't.
Okay,
I know.
all right. You could kill me. Go ahead.
I will say it is newer. It's a newer musical.
Okay.
Tease that.
All right.
Yeah. So.
I have my ways. I'll find out. So.
I have no doubt.
But okay. What else?
I'm really excited for.
Don't you guys work a couple years ahead, though? I mean, you kind of have to.
Kind of, yes.
To get rights and stuff.
Yeah, I'm really excited to work with our playwright in residence, Jessica Huang, who.
I have to have her on the show.
You might also a fellow person of the global majority.
Exactly.
Who is also biracial and grew up like me in the Midwest, and Jessica's work is just breathtaking.
Fantastic. Do you work directly with Richard Roberts, the dramaturg?
Yes, Richard, who sits right next to me.
You know, he's the one who gave me my first job as a reviewer.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, yeah, we go way back. I said, I don't know anything about reading. I never read. He said, oh, you can do it. He says, you're smart, you got style, you can do it.
That's exactly how Richard said it.
I got to thank him. You know, I thank him profusely all the time I see him, but he's brilliant, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I value Richard so much as someone who holds so much, not only institutional knowledge, but knowledge of like the city and this place.
Well, let's give a shout out to Ben. You already have, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, would you regard him as a mentor, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ben is such a T. He was so kind. And I'm not going to lie, I haven't experienced an artistic director that is as kind as Ben. And that's what I think had me like really taken with him and with IRT, is the level of kindness that I felt on every level of the theater.
And obviously he saw how you could fit into the big picture of his vision, right? As an artistic director.
Yeah.
How about Suzanne Sweeney?
Oh, Suze is in the control of numbers in a way that I don't know how her brain works.
Yeah.
Suze has been also so supportive of everything, of IRT's direction, its vision, its commitment to diversity. Suze has been such a wonderful support.
Yeah. So you're enjoying Indy and your life here?
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying. It's been so cold. It's like I got here and I was like, oh my gosh, new job. And then it was immediately winter. And I'm like really excited.
And when did you start?
August, okay. Yeah. So fresh.
Okay, so are you enjoying living in Fountain Square?
I love Fountain Square.
Yeah.
I walk my dog that I got, in October.
What kind of dog do you have?
She's a Pitty and Golden mix.
Oh, a Pitty. Oh, I love them. They're so sweet.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's an angel.
If they're nurtured, they are sweet.
Yes. She's like at home right now, probably being like, where is she?
What are some of your favorite restaurants? Have you found any?
So I love Homie Hot Pot. Homie Hot Pot.
You mean on Lafayette Square?
Yeah.
Oh, I go there.
I love Homie Hot Pot.
It's so great.
The like giant
they
hot
got
pot
everything.
buffet.
They've
I
got
know.
pizza.
It is my comfort food.
Sushi to order. They got it all.
Exactly.
Okay.
I love Homie Hot Pot. I got of course, Milktooth, Bluebeard, Bodie.
You are a foodie.
Thai Spice on the south side.
Yeah.
I love Thai Spice. That's really spicy.
Yeah, cool. Well, listen, time to wrap this up, but what a delight.
Yes,
So
thank
much,
you.
we share so much in common, but I think it bodes well for the theater to have your eye and to have your sensibilities, and given all your interests, ethnic and otherwise, it's going to be good for the city to have you. So welcome to Indy.
Thank
What is your
you.
message to Indianapolis?
I think if I had a message for Indianapolis, it would be to embrace change and to embrace your neighbor. Now more than ever, embrace the people around you, because community is all we have, and community is what's going to get us through.
And for people listening around the country, what do you have to say to them about Indianapolis?
About Indianapolis is that it is an incredibly diverse place with people from every walk of life and every experience. There are incredible intellectuals here. There are incredible sports too, but that to never write off any place, to never think of one place as simply one thing, but to know that there are always people of every walk of life everywhere.
Well said. Thank you, Cara, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I'll be on the aisle.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.